My dad loved cars, especially big cars with big engines. And because they made him happy, they made me happy. When I was in high school, at a time when American cars were shrinking down to compact and subcompact sizes, my dad went out and bought a brand new Mercury Marquis Brougham. And that bad boy was about 78 feet long. It was jet black, and it had an engine the size of a cement mixer. The kids in the neighborhood had never seen such a thing. They thought he had bought a limousine. They had only seen cars like that in movies and in funeral processions. My dad was proud of that car, so proud. He loved that car. He taught me how to wax it by hand. He would let me use it on occasion, but only after I washed it and waxed it. And one night, I was probably in college at this time, about 19 years old. I came home on a Friday night, and it was late. Now, the wheelbase of this car and the contour of our driveway was such that it was easier to back the car into the garage than to back it out of the garage. It was still a trick, but it was easier to back it in than to back it out. So I was backing it in, and I scraped the right front fender on the door jamb. I did more than scrape it. I left a pretty good dent. And I felt terrible, and I got out and I looked at it. I didn't want to wake him up. It was shortly after 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't imagine what I would have been doing out at 2 o'clock in the morning when I was 19. I must have been at one of those 24-hour perpetual adoration chapels. It's the only explanation that makes sense to me. But I'm out in the garage, and I get out the wax, and I start trying to buff this thing out and minimize the damage, but you can't buff out a dent, you know. So I finally decided I would leave it, and I would tell Dad in the morning. I will never forget that Saturday morning. I got up and I looked outside, and my dad was already there. He was standing in front of the garage with his hands on his hips, and he looked at the car, and he looked at the door jamb, and he looked back at the car, and he hung his head, and I thought, I better get out there and face the music. So I ran out there, and as I approached him, I began right away, Dad, I am, but he put his hand up and stopped me right there. And he said, Steve, it's just a car. Here's what's going to happen. Someday, you're going to have a son who wrecks one of your cars. And I want you to respond to him the same way I'm responding to you. Now let's go have breakfast. And that was it. He never brought it up again. He never spoke of it again. He did not wait for me to apologize. He did not demand atonement. He did not lecture me or talk to me about how I was going to pay for the damage. He didn't assign any of that to me. All he said was, it's just a car. Let's go have breakfast. So we have this story of Jesus walking into Jericho, expecting to just pass right through. And he sees this conniving, weaselly little tax collector, Zacchaeus, up in the tree. And he doesn't pause to scold him. He doesn't demand repentance or atonement. He doesn't point out his sins to him. All he says is, Zacchaeus, come on down. I want to stay at your house. That's it. Because Jesus always led with love. He always led with love. And the story tells us that Zacchaeus does have an awakening, and he promises to reform. Whether he actually does or not, we don't know, but he has the awakening and he makes the pledge. And that sequence matters. It matters a lot. Love first, reform second. Change follows love. We have to get past this notion that we have to go around trying to fix everyone else, and then we might be able to love them. That's not how this works. It just isn't. Love first. Lead with love. Reform follows. It opens people up. It wakens their hearts. Do that. We need to worry so much less about changing others so that they're more lovable to us, and worry a lot more about changing our hearts so we are more loving like Christ. About 30 years later, I was sitting in my study on a Saturday afternoon when one of my sons came in and said, "Dad, you better come outside." And I walked out into the driveway, and he had backed my truck out of the garage and scraped it alongside of a car sitting in the driveway. He took out 2 of my vehicles in one swipe. And he said, "Dad," and I put up my hand. And I said, "Here's what's going to happen. Someday, one of my grandchildren will wreck one of your cars. And I want you to treat them the same way I'm treating you. Let's go have ice cream." May God's loving mercy rain down upon you. And may God's loving mercy stir the heart within you. May God's loving mercy flow forth into this world from you.